Welcome, everyone, to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Monday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Coming up on the show, some madness in the NHL that kind of gets cut off. Also, some madness in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. A crazy weekend in the Canadian Football League, and we get ready for a crazy weekend in professional wrestling. Plus, our NFL preview continues as we are held accountable for last year's actions, and it's another mock draft. So it is a very busy show. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. All right, we begin in the National Hockey League as the San Jose Sharks have ruined all of our fun. So to recap, the St. Louis Blues gave offer sheets to two RFAs that the Edmonton Oilers have, Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. By no means cornerstone pieces of the Edmonton Oilers franchise, but players that you would rather have than not, and certainly players you would rather have than have them leave for nothing. But maybe not players you wanted to pay that amount of money to. So it's an interesting, weird dynamic that goes on there. And the Edmonton Oilers can't just match immediately because their salary cap, it sucks. So they were in a very difficult spot. And then fucking San Jose Sharks come in and just ruin all of our fun because the Sharks have acquired Cody Ceci from the Edmonton Oilers along with a third-round pick in exchange for a defenseman who I guess played for Chris Knobloch somewhere and will probably factor in minimally to the Edmonton Oilers situation. Ceci has a long track record of being kind of a fringe defenseman who is trusted in situations that are greatly beyond his skill set. And so to go out and acquire this player from Edmonton, to bail them out to get this guy is so frustrating. Like he is equal parts better than most of the defensemen the San Jose Sharks have, and also not a good NHL defenseman. And so to be like, no, we need to get that guy on our rebuilding roster right now for a third-round pick, and only be taking on a third-round pick, and bailing these guys out of the situation with the Blues is so incredibly frustrating. The Oilers were in a jam, and to get them out for just an extra third-round pick doesn't seem worth it to me. If I'm any other team, I'm like, you know what? That first next year is looking pretty good, or that second next year is looking pretty good. That is... I can't imagine settling for just getting a third-round pick to take on the final year of Cody Ceci's contract and needing to have Cody Ceci. Like, best case scenario for the Sharks is they're able to flip him at the deadline to a team that thinks they're in it and thinks they're a 10th defenseman away from making a run. So I don't see the real upside gain here from the San Jose Sharks to just take this on for a third-round pick. Now, Mike Grier, their general manager, does have ties to the Oilers organization. First off, he played there. We know that part. Secondly, apparently his first job in management was a scouting position under Stan Bowman. And so, like, I guess that there was, like, a little bit of helping your guys out. But from a Sharks organizational standpoint, it doesn't help you to help the Edmonton Oilers. I don't think the Oilers are going to have the Sharks back in a trade somewhere down the road now because the Oilers were given options thanks to the San Jose Sharks. And so I don't think this makes any sense. And I think, quite frankly, the reason that this took so long to do was probably everyone else in the Sharks front office was trying to hold Mike Grier back from the phone like the Avengers when they're trying to get Thanos's Infinity Gauntlet off, and there's just like guys they're pulling and Thanos is being put to sleep by Mantis. And I watched this movie yesterday, that's why the reference is so deep. And they're pulling on both arms and they're just about to get it off, and then someone punched him in the face and he woke up. That's probably exactly literally blow for blow what happened. Like I just this doesn't make any sense out there. And look, I understand there is, especially for struggling teams. And I obviously, based in Calgary, work on Calgary radio at times, work on Calgary YouTube at other times. The Flames, I think, should be doing stuff like this, but this exact situation, it doesn't really seem like the Sharks are getting enough for what the Oilers actually needed in this situation. Like, Cody Ceci, just taking on Cody Ceci's contract to the Sharks is probably just worth a third-round pick. But when you're looking at what it means now for the Edmonton Oilers, I think it's worth significantly more than a third-round pick to the Edmonton Oilers to be able to free up that space and make this move. So now, what do the Oilers do? According to Puckpedia, with the contracts matched, the Oilers are about $6 million in the hole. You can absolutely make the case for not keeping Broberg and be fine. It's a $4.5 million cap hit for a player who has spent exactly 0% of his NHL career looking like a $4.5 million player. That being said, he is 23 years old and could absolutely be a $7, $8 million player very, very soon. And so to lose that player from your organization for nada, I guess it's not technically nada. You get whatever the compensation is for an RFA of a contract that size. So you get something back for it. But that still stings a little bit. And so that is where I think this is interesting because the Edmonton Oilers, traditionally not an organization swimming in defensive talent. Sorry. Now they have Darnell Nurse, who is what he is, but I think a strong defenseman. Ekholm completely changed that organization and has got the most out of Bouchard. But I do think you could have looked at this year and had a pairing of Nurse, Broberg, Ekholm, and Ekholm and Bouchard, and then whoever you want on the stretch, Stetcher, Kulak, whoever. And been very much okay with it. Like there is a world where you can get a lot out of a Philip Broberg. I would suggest even $4.5 million out of him. But there's also a world where he kind of just isn't it. Like he becomes the Timu version of Evan Bouchard and never really quite clicks. And now for a team that is already paying too much on Darnell Nurse, who is about to be paying a lot for Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, whilst also already paying them a lot, and then also on top of that paying an extra to Evan Bouchard, you don't really want to waste $4.5 million if the guy isn't going to be that good. So it's an interesting call for Edmonton there. They also go out and acquire Vasily Podkolzin from the Vancouver Canucks earlier in the day. So that would potentially be your Dylan Holloway replacement. I personally would prefer Holloway over Podkolzin. There is absolutely some personal bias in there. I've interviewed the kid. I've called a couple of his games. So that there's a thing there. So I could absolutely be having a bias there. But I do think that Holloway is a little bit further along than where Podkolzin is, although both players in kind of similar spots in their organization where pretty talented, just can't really stick, but probably would get like 25 minutes a night on the San Jose Sharks. So weird spots for them to be in. And so you can kind of see the case to not really accept to not really match either of them. But Edmonton now kind of has the cap situation where they can at least do it with one. And honestly, I would be attaching heaven and earth to an Evander Kane contract to try to get that one out of there. And then you can just keep both. And I think you feel pretty all right with that. And I like the team that they have built if they're able to keep those guys around and let them kind of start to fill in those roster spots. But no matter how this plays out, this was just fun. The offer sheets are there, so you may as well take advantage of it as much as you can. The fact that we only get this every few years is frustrating. And I'm not saying like go out and do this for random RFA fourth liner X, but there are pretty good players generally available in these spots. And I just put pressure on these teams to do it. And like if the St. Louis Blues are willing to move, let's say Pavel Buchnevich, are the Edmonton Oilers just not going to want to make a trade with them because they did this? That would be very poor management. Like, yeah, you can get pissed at a team for doing it, but I like in the long term, how much does it really affect what you're looking to do? And so like you can screw these up, you know, like there was the Jay Feaster, Ryan O'Reilly situation here a few years ago, several years ago now, that probably wouldn't have worked out great in the Flames' favor if that would have worked out. So it's not just a fail-safe 100% of the time this thing is awesome, but it at least gets a little bit of buzz going. And look, like from a hockey standpoint, not that they're super focused on what I'm talking about, but this got some buzz about the National Hockey League for a couple of weeks when it probably, or for a week anyway, where it probably wouldn't have had any anyway. Player movement is king when it comes to conversations and stuff like that. So it's good for the league. I think it's I think an interesting way of team building, and it puts pressure on other teams and makes them make some decisions. So overall, this was a really, really fun week, and it provides some interesting looks for Edmonton. At the end of the day, if I'm Edmonton, I try to keep both. I think there's something there in Broberg, and I really think there's something there in Holloway. And even if there isn't, Broberg at 4.5 might be a little bit difficult to move, but it's 2 years and you can eat some of it anyway. that can be a big piece in a trade that you're trying to make. If nothing else, he can be a pretty good like salary matching type of a piece if you are trying to make some money work and something along those lines. Like if you are Edmonton and you're looking to bring in an $8 million player, well, now you have a very good trade chip and $4.5 million that you can kind of just shove into it and do that. And for a team that could be rebuilding, that would be an interesting piece to try to go out and move. And Holloway, I just think he's going to be good. And for a team that was within a game of the Stanley Cup final, I just don't think you should be giving up good for draft picks right now. And that, so I think Edmonton, like I said, I would try to move on from Kane. They have moved on from CC Grier, but that would be the move that I would try to make. All right, it was an interesting weekend in the Canadian Football League. Let's shift from Canadian hockey teams to Canadian football teams. The CFL's most outstanding player for a couple of years ago has a bit of work to do after his week one debut. Nathan Rourke struggled in his debut against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in a tough loss for BC. So I think the moral of the story here, kids, is no matter how talented you are, maybe you need more than 3 practices, with a team to get ready. This team is actually quite a bit different than the one that they had a couple of years ago that he was able to really put on that type of a show with. And so I think like it made sense to give it a go, right? And like I said in the predictions, 75% of Nathan Rourke is better than most quarterbacks in this league. It just, we were further off from 75% of Nathan Rourke than I think we all thought. And my initial thought was, man, maybe they should have just kept Dolegala around for one more week. I don't think what we saw from Rourke was that much worse than Dolegala. This was just, it was a difficult matchup to go into. Winnipeg's defense, we've talked about it here for a few weeks. Winnipeg's defense is actually quite good. Tyrell Ford is a stud on that defensive unit. Big Hill getting banged up hurts, but this is still, I think, a good defensive football team. And they really put a lot of pressure on Rourke, and he did not handle it all that well. I still think he's going to be fine. I still think the Lions are going to be fine. But you look at it now, he doesn't really have a whole lot of runway to be working with at this point. BC plays Ottawa on Saturday, so they get a bit of help there Sunday to Saturday. That's not the worst turnaround you have in the CFL. Riders are going Friday to Thursday with facing a team that was on a bye. Winnipeg plays on Friday. So there are certainly worse turnarounds. They get that one. But BC now, all of a sudden, they are in second place in the West and are a bad week of results away from being in fourth because Winnipeg and Calgary are right behind them. And so the pressure is on Nathan Rourke immediately to go out there and try and get the job done. But the West, man, is so crazy. Like, there are 2 teams in the West who have a positive point differential right now. Does anyone want to take a guess at who that may be? I'll give you one. It's the team with the lucha mask right there. In the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The other one's Edmonton. Aside from that, Calgary is quick math -44. Sorry, Winnipeg is ahead. Sorry, apologies. Winnipeg is +11 after this week. But BC's -15. And Saskatchewan is +11. So it's kind of wild that A, that's where the West is. But B, that's where BC is. Like that, this should be a dominant team, and they just aren't right now. But with Nathan Rourke at the helm, you do think that they'll get back on track. Facing a good Ottawa team that has some pressure on them. Chad Kelly is coming back now. We'll get to that in a second here, but they have a bit of pressure on them this week. Just an overall thing. I don't get why teams are so timid about going forward on third down in the Canadian Football League. And I feel like they use the the clock's different as an excuse to just punt the football away with a minute and a half to go in a game. Like, did what we could, took 28 seconds off of the clock, good for us. The field's huge in the CFL, and teams like just give you a yard, right? Like we have teams on 2nd and 2 doing quarterback sneaks and getting it. And so like 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, you should be able to draw up a play that gets you something open in that area and can help keep drives going. I think teams are way too content to just, it's the CFL. You get like 8 possessions in the final 3 minutes. we just have to run the ball up the middle and there we go. Like that just seems like such an antiquated way of thinking about things. And defenses are ready for it. Like I Saskatchewan was a prime example of it this week, where I thought they were way too conservative on third down, and that ends up costing them a game. Now, so does their field goal kicker going 3 for 7, and their best receiver making some bad drops. But I just think that you can be way more in control of those situations. And for a league that will give up points for field position constantly when it comes to punts and not booting them into the end zone and trying to down them at like the 1 or 2 or even just inside the 10 or inside the 20 in some cases, to have that, but then also be very conservative. Well, all right, I guess we have to just run it up the middle on back-to-back plays where we can only kill 20 seconds of the clock off. I find it weird that the NFL way of killing the clock, where you run the ball up the middle a few times and just hope for the best, sticks around, but you don't follow the NFL model of like being a bit more aggressive and just trying to extend some drives. And okay, well, if there is still 3 or 4 possessions left in this game, then why are we abandoning the pass and just going with a very predictable run when we can limit this and now just control the football? So I think that teams need to be significantly more aggressive on third downs in just as a general league. And I think you could get I think you could get a coach that could come in and be a bit more aggressive and actually really change how this thing works. So that was just something I noticed. But this isn't so much the week coming up, or the week that was, more the week coming up. Chad Kelly is back. And just like personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. If there was an issue, it probably should have been longer than 9 games. And if there wasn't, he should have been playing all season long. The last chance clause is really, really interesting. Like I don't think a non-star gets that. Like a left tackle isn't coming in and getting, okay, well, this is your last chance. They're probably just done. And so like it just from everything that you kind of see for how he has carried himself in this whole thing, it doesn't seem like there is an ounce of remorse. And if there is, he needs to express it, and needs to, I think, express whatever he did that got him suspended was wrong, because like obviously something happened or else he wouldn't have been suspended. So I think there needs to be an acknowledgement like, hey, what I did was wrong. And these are the ways that I am growing and learning from it, instead of, oh, it's a second chance. Everyone, would you not want a second chance? Everyone deserves a second chance. I think you need to show that you deserve that second chance by proving that you learned what went wrong with the first one, right? So, hopefully he comes out and very eloquently puts what went wrong and what he needs to change. But until then, like I don't like it. I just don't like it. Now, from a purely football standpoint, this is a major boost. The Argos have been dreadful to watch offensively all season long, but are still just 3 points back of Ottawa for a home playoff game. If he can make this this offense even just average, then this, with how this defense is playing, it's a major step in the right direction. And they have a lot of weapons that have not been maximized with Dukes and with Arbuckle out there. Kelly at least can do that. And that gives the defense a bit of time to be able to kind of build some things up and at least get a bit of rest. So I think, again, from a football standpoint, it's massive for Toronto. From a personal standpoint, a lot of work needs to be done for me to be okay with this whole entire situation. So that's a story from the Canadian Football League. We'll get the football back up and running a little bit later on when we continue our NFL preview at the end of the show. But right now, let's shift gears and get ready for pro wrestling's one of the biggest shows of the year in pro wrestling, as AEW presents All In from Wembley Stadium. What are some of the early things I'm working on and looking for? Let's talk about it. AEW All In goes down this weekend from Wembley Stadium in England. In the main event, it is Swerve Strickland defending the AEW World Championship against Bryan Danielson. This feud has been tremendous. I think it has brought out the best in both performers and really brought out, like, it's really highlighted the best aspects of where these performers are at in their career, with Danielson fighting for one last chance, and also like his quest to help the next generation out, and Swerve Strickland looking to take that from him, but not just his wrestling career that we all know he holds so dear, but also try to be like, yeah, and this push to extend your legacy by helping out the next generation, it ain't shit. I'm going to beat up on Wheeler Yuta. You've done nothing. And now you're just going to fade away. I think it is tremendous work from both of these men. And look, I thought having Hangman as the guy in this world title match at Wembley Stadium was the perfect kind of blow off to this whole thing. But I think you've got an amazing storyline out of all of this. And now you still have Hangman Swerve in your back pocket that you can do whenever. And it has, I think it's elevated Swerve. It's not that Danielson needed elevating, but boy, has he looked good. And now you have this intrigue kind of hanging over the whole thing of what does Hangman Adam Page actually do, and that can set you up for pay-per-views further on down the line. In the tag team title match, it will be the Young Bucks defending against FTR and the Acclaimed. And I think the Acclaimed have done a good job of kind of evolving and really stepping up and getting into a more serious tone with these characters. I have a Scissor Me Daddy Ass shirt in my closet. Like this is a group that I have loved for basically their entirety. They have been just a blast to watch and to enjoy. But I do think there needed to be a bit of an evolution in their characters. And I think it starts with Blood and Guts, and now it has been able to evolve into this more serious role that this team is taking on. And so that has been really great to see. It should be a really interesting match now with them, the Bucks and FTR. Admittedly, Bucks and FTR is getting a little, and while I have liked the Acclaimed, that the setup for this has been a little blah to me, which is something you can say for a few of these, quite frankly. But I think it's going to be a great match, and I love this evolution from the Acclaimed, and I think it's going to be a tricky balancing act to kind of keep the parts of the characters that we liked, and kind of stay true to these characters and to this group, but while also developing that edge and moving forward with that. In another match that has my attention, it's Mercedes Moné against Britt Baker. This one was stunted a little bit. Britt Baker got suspended, and so Moné had to carry the whole thing, and it hasn't gotten into the next gear that I think it could have. Mercedes Moné is maybe not necessarily the performer that a lot of people, I shouldn't even say that. It's just not a character, and it's just not a promo style that have clicked. I think she is quite good. But I think she is quite good. Like specifically, she's a very good wrestler. And I think it is more produced packages and stuff that help build her. And because she has been the only one in this feud, she has had to do the grunt work in front of the crowds as well. And so that has, I think, kind of limited this. But again, the match is going to be fantastic. The build hasn't been all that great, which I think is just the tagline for AEW at this point. But I will say, Camille Brickhouse being added to it is a really fun wrinkle, kind of being the Diesel to Mercedes' Shawn Michaels and building her up that way. Camille, I got to ring announce for her when I kind of returned to ring announcing with Wild Rose Wrestling about this time last year. Great professional, phenomenal in the ring, an amazing look as well, and I think a real great addition to this overall package, and I think provides a fun wrinkle for what should be a great match. But when we're talking about great matches, I think one is probably going to steal the show, and that will be MJF against Will Ospreay for the United States International Championship. This match is going to be incredible. The first one exceeded all expectations, and now this one will be expected to top that. I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but I think it'll be interesting. I think we have seen a real edge in Will Ospreay. I think his character work since coming over to AEW has been brilliant. And some of the stuff with Kyle Fletcher, the Daniel Garcia thing felt a little forced, but the Kyle Fletcher part of it to get to that point was really great. I don't love that MJF is doing the real American gimmick, quite frankly. I think he is just better than that. And so to do that, like, you stop what would have been like some support behind this guy anyway. But like doing the real American gimmick as a heel thing in the States is weird. And like, he's good enough to pull it off, but it feels very cheap for me. It feels like something you would give someone who isn't as good of a character as MJF is. And so hopefully this is an evolution that is very quick and you don't really have to deal with for a whole lot, but the match is going to be great. Overall, I think it's been an all right build. AEW has been hitting their stride in a few areas over the last little bit. There are still some classic AEW storyline problems and things of that nature. The Young Bucks being in charge, but not being totally in charge. Like it feels like they're kind of halfway on both, and it hasn't made that story click. And then the fallout from Blood and Guts, where it's just like, okay, well, they didn't light Jack Perry on fire, so he gets a title match now. That has been that's been all right, but it feels like there has been some issues with that, and with a few of the stories where it's just like, and now they're having a match. Cool. But overall, this is going to be a fantastic show coming up this weekend. Barring something unforeseen, I should be able to watch this one live, and so we're hoping to get a quick post show up once the show is done this weekend. So that's going to be that's going to be what we're doing here for All In, but we're going to have some coverage here throughout the week as well. All right, let's shift gears and talk about the Ultimate Fighting Championship, as UFC 305 is now in the books and the title picture stays the same at 185 pounds. UFC 305 is now done, and Dricus Du Plessis gets the job done as he submits Israel Adesanya in the 4th round. We're going to be hitting on just kind of the main stories for the main event here. Later on today, there's going to be a full main card recap of UFC 304. Sorry, UFC 305 with all the different fight breakdowns and stuff like that. But for just the kind of flagship show here, we're just going to focus on kind of the big stories coming out of it. And that is Dricus Du Plessis. Yes, it's unorthodox at times, but it can be effective. I had him down on my scorecard going into the 4th round. He came out with a big punch, a takedown, and a choke, closes the show. And so it is effective. It's not pretty, but it's not what it was 10, 15 years ago, where you would have like, oh, you don't know what angle it's coming from. And it's just like, it's all awkward. It's not the most fluid, and you're probably not teaching the Dricus Du Plessis fighting style at gyms across North America and the world. But there is a surprising amount of technique in it as well. It's very, very strange. But it's tough to deal with because there is power that comes with it. And like I said, there's a bit of technique. Like he'll charge in and he's just like Homer, where if I hit you, it's not my fault. And then he'll stop and he'll hit the most technical fucking 2-punch combo up the middle that you've seen, and it'll rock him. And he'll put that pressure on, but he'll do it in a way that'll open up an opportunity, and he'll drill you with a left, and he'll pounce immediately and just get the choke. The takedowns are weird. Yes, I will grant you that, where they basically just look like a pro wrestling flying crossbody block. But it still works. And now it's 3 straight wins against 3 former champions in Robert Whittaker, Sean Strickland, and now Israel Adesanya. So you can say all the technique stuff you want. This is a great run. And he is very deserving of holding that championship at 185 pounds. And so I think now what's next for both is really interesting. DDP calling for a super fight with Alex Pereira. I'd rather see Pereira move up in heavyweight than fight the 185-pound champion. But there isn't really that obvious next intriguing contender at 185 pounds. And I don't think you can go immediate rematch for Izzy because he's now lost 3 of his last 4. So what could be next for these guys? It will probably be just like a challenger that feels a bit like a mandatory for Dricus Du Plessis. And for Israel Adesanya, like 205 doesn't seem like an option after he kind of got bullied around by Jan Blachowicz. The fight to make at 205 would be a bout with Alex Pereira, but you've lost 3 of 4. It's tough to now shoehorn you into a title fight in a division where you are 0-1 in. So there isn't really an obvious thing. The thing with him though is that he's still very good. And look, I had him winning that fight right up until he wasn't. So he's not cooked or anything. It's just I don't know where you go from here with him. Like there is a rematch you could do with Du Plessis. Quite frankly, there's a rematch you could do with Sean Strickland as well. And try to work Izzy up that way. But like this, I know the UFC doesn't do tune-up fights. But this is the case for the UFC doing tune-up fights. And I understand it is weird to suggest like basically a pro wrestling squash match where it's real and you are now inflicting a great amount of punishment on another human being to get another guy back to where they want. But they do it in boxing all the time. And it's also like it's a tremendous opportunity for someone not in the top 15 in middleweight. Like, just give Izzy someone, I don't want to say like off the contender series or whatever, but give Izzy like a top 30 fight. Put it on ABC as like a fight night card, and just in a let's get this guy right and get him back on track sort of a way, and then you continue to build up a star. The UFC has never done it, and I don't hate that they don't do it. I just think there are some times where it maybe makes some sense, where you have like a situation here with Izzy where he has lost 3 of his last 4. And you just kind of you don't want to keep feeding him to the wolves and have it seem like it's over. So go out, give him maybe a bit more of a softer landing spot, and either A, he's cooked and he loses to that guy, and now all of a sudden you've created another star out of that, or you have an opportunity now to continue to build Izzy's career that way. So that's just, I think there is a bit of a case for sometimes the Ultimate Fighting Championship going the tune-up route. So we'll see. Like I said, we're going to have a full UFC 305 main card breakdown coming out a little bit later on today. And we are also, throughout the week, going to have some more post UFC 305 coverage. Going to be looking at pound for pound rankings. I'm going to debut a new UFC segment coming up probably on Thursday here. And then Friday, we're going to look at the fights to make for all the key fighters coming off of UFC 305. But now it's time to shift gears and get ready for the start of the NFL season. And I always start our season previews looking back at what happened last year and what we can learn from last season. And so the other day we did what can we learn from the Kansas City Chiefs and how they were built. Today, it's our accountability as I look at what went right and what went wrong in NFL and fantasy picks last season. So let's get into it. Our NFL 2024 preview continues on here. Today is the last day we are looking back to last season and what we can learn from that. The rest of it is all looking forward. And so today is the NFL accountability episode where I go over what I got right, what I got wrong from the main picks from last year. We're not going to go over every team, but we are going to do some of the fantasy stuff and some of the other segment things that I did. So, we will start with overvalued and undervalued. We'll start with overvalued. The main one there was the New York Jets. And now injuries helped us out a ton. I will grant you that, but that was part of why we thought that the Jets were overvalued. You have an old quarterback. I thought Aaron Rodgers was kind of cooked anyway, and so I kind of missed out on a full season of rightness. But still, that is one of the risks you take with a 40-something-year-old quarterback is injuries can happen, and sometimes it's 4.5 minutes into a season. So I will gladly take the W on that. We thought the Saints were overvalued at 9.5. We just got the win there. And kind of the same reasons we thought they were overvalued last year, we think they're going to be that again this year. Minnesota, we thought overvalued at 8.5. And again, now some of those same situations kind of popping up this year, again, where I thought the defense took a pretty substantial step back, and I didn't know how good Kirk Cousins was going to be. Now, didn't know his leg was going to explode, but I still thought there was a bit of a horseshoe from what happened 2 years ago, and then going into last year, I thought there was going to be a bit more regression than the market had built in. Carolina, over 7.5. I think you're going to find we do this again with the number 1 overall pick. I thought they were overvalued. I thought that there was way too much just, oh yeah, Bryce Young will come in and fix everything. And then you look at the rest of the roster and, oh, well, it sucks. And so that one felt pretty easy. Denver over 8.5. We just get the win there. Admittedly, I thought that one, when I saw I had that down before I went back to the standings, I was like, oh man, we crushed that one. I didn't realize Denver had got to 8 wins on the season. So, but maybe another team we might look at in this category again coming up in a little bit. From a fantasy standpoint, Cooper Kupp at 7th overall thought was way overvalued. There was just a couple of these. Him and Tony Pollard. Everyone, and Najee Harris, quite frankly, everyone was drafting at best case scenario. And for Pollard, that regression hit like a house. Najee Harris, he finishes his RB20, so that's a win for us as well. Cooper Kupp, he gets hurt. But again, that's a risk factor that gets baked in with a old receiver, or older receiver, I should say. And that one stung for me because I have him in fantasy football, in a very deep, very competitive keeper league. And so that made it a bit challenging this season. But it felt like all 3 of those guys were a little bit overvalued. The 2 that we got wrong in overvalued, and I'm not just looking at what I got right, I promise you. But it was Travis Etienne and Jahmyr Gibbs. Etienne finishing RB, or I thought at RB12 was way overvalued. I just didn't think he was that good. and Tank Bisbee was going to come in and steal all that work. And instead, ETN was amazing. Tank fumbled a bunch, and it was ETN's backfield all season long. And so that was just a misevaluation of the talent by me on ETN. And for Gibbs, we thought that the opportunities just maybe weren't going to be there with David Montgomery. And I also kind of thought Detroit was overvalued in general all season long. Gibbs does finish as the RB10. I will say for about 10 weeks, I was right on this, but just didn't quite get there. Undervalued now. We had the Titans undervalued at 7.5. That's obviously a loss. I thought because of the injuries that they had 2 years ago, that there was going to be just a full bounce back, and it just never really got there. We did get Seattle right at 8.5. People, I think, were just ready for Geno to fall off one more time. And well, he kind of did. The rest of the team was quite good. The Chargers, we had them way undervalued. Last year was just a season from hell from there. And so I maybe should have learned to not trust that team, but I did. And then we had a couple week one plays. Cincinnati -4 against Cleveland. That was a big loss. And Philadelphia -4.5 against the Patriots. They won by 5. So we got that one right. And now in our season preview portion of it, Miami over 9.5. That was a win. Miami to win the division. That was a loss. Again, that looked like a win for about 15 weeks of the season. And then Tua just fell off. But that one, it was all well if Tua's one hit away from getting hurt. So yeah, it's football, man. So's everybody. And I think there might be a little bit of that baked into how I view this season as well. The New York Jets to miss the postseason. That one was a big win. We kind of discussed it before. Baltimore over 10.5 and to win the division. Very much believers in Baltimore last year. So we got a couple of wins there. Tennessee, we already went over it. We went over 7.5 and to win the division. That was strike 1 and strike 2. But Jacksonville under 9.5 and to miss the playoffs. WW on that. And there's, I might have changed my tune on that. I'm still doing a bit more of my NFL research, but as it goes along, they're a team that I'm getting there a little bit more and more. I kind of go back and forth on. The Houston Texans under 6.5. That one was a gigantic L. We got that one entirely wrong. We already discussed Chargers over 9.5. Got that one wrong. Kansas City under 11.5, but to win the AFC. Nailed that one absolutely perfectly. Denver under 8.5 was a win. The Raiders under 8.5 was a win as well. Although very, very, actually, was that a win? I have that marked down as a win, but I thought they finished 9-8. Maybe they were 8-9 last year. But either way, that one was not as close as we thought it was going to be after the start of the season. They do finish 8-9. So we did get that one right, but that one was supposed to be a lock for a bit. We had Philadelphia going to the Super Bowl. That was a miss. Green Bay over 7.5. That was a win. That I remember that. That was based off of, look, Aaron Rodgers got this team to over 7.5 wins last year, and he wasn't that good. So even if Jordan Love sucks, there's still going to be some progression there. Now we had them to win the division, and that was a loss. And we thought Detroit under 9.5 and to miss the playoffs, and that was a loss. Our biggest win of the year was Tampa Bay over 6.5 and to win the division. That was just kind of recognizing how bad the rest of the division was and just how evenly matched everyone there was. And so there might be a lesson to take from that. We will see. Carolina under 7.5. We got that one right. Seattle over 8.5. It's weird. I have that one as a win in one spot and as a loss in another. I may have got that wrong when looking at overvalued, undervalued. You know, they finished at 9-8. So that's a win in this spot. So we do get that one correct. And then we went Arizona under 3.5, just getting a loss there. So the lessons, injuries helped us quite a bit with Aaron Rodgers. I guess that one specifically was, I guess the Chargers as well. They maybe hurt us a little bit as well. I think we tried to go too hard against the grain on the Detroit Lions. Although it worked out on Jacksonville as well. I thought we did a good job of kind of targeting who the bad teams were going to be. Didn't quite pinpoint or nail some of the good teams as well as I would have hoped. But overall, I think a pretty good season last year. But like I said, some lessons to take from that. I think that sometimes narratives really start to build, and that like the unknown of Jordan Love. Whoa, it's a drop from Aaron Rodgers. Well, How could they possibly? And the Tua situation where like, well, it's one hit away. What are they going to do? And so I think there is a little bit of value in going against some of those narratives some of the time. All right, that is going to do it for that portion of the NFL preview. We're going to have a lot more looking at this upcoming season in the next little bit. But right now, we are going to shift gears and continue our fantasy football preview as we have another mock draft. This time, mock draft number 6. It is time for another mock draft. So if you're new around here, we are doing mock drafts from all 12 spots in a 12-team half-point PPR. Going to do a couple other ones throughout the season, but this is how we prepped for last fantasy season, and it went pretty well, so we're doing it again. So wherever you are consuming this, the first 5 mock drafts are up now, so check those out. But let's get into it now and do one here from pick number 6, the halfway point. All right, we'll hit OK, and we will get going. So first, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. Christian McCaffrey comes off the board 4th, followed by Jamar Chase. And now it is our turn. And so when we look at who is available here, Bijan Robinson is the top back available, top player available according to ADP, followed by Breece Hall, also available at running back, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley. At wide receiver, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown as well, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Marvin Harrison, Drake Leonard, and Devontae Adams are the ones here. Bijan feels like the easy pick. You could certainly make a case for Breece Hall as well, but in this spot, we are going to go Bijan Robinson with our spot. And so immediately Breece Hall goes right after that, followed by the 2 Browns and Wilson. Kyren Williams at the back half of the first round. That seems just way too expensive for me. Puka Nacua, Jahmyr Gibbs, at the turn there, then Jonathan Taylor, Drake London, Marvin Harrison, Devontae Adams, and Saquon Barkley. And so we are here now with Travis Etienne at running back. We also have Derrick Henry available, Devon Achane, and Josh Jacobs. At quarterback, Josh Allen is up there. And then at wide receiver, it is Olave, Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and Mike Evans. We have been getting Deebo a fair amount in these drafts. This one, it feels a little bit high to get. I'm going to try something here because, like, as much as I appreciate that I was wrong on ETN a season ago, I still don't know if I want him just locked in as one of my top 2 picks. So I am going to go with the quarterback, Josh Allen. We've been waiting on quarterback right around the Kyler Murray time. Let's see what it looks like when we do take Josh Allen with our second round pick and just see what these drafts look like at the quarterback spot. So Etienne, Olave, Henry go after us along with Achane, Laporta, and Kelsey, so a couple of tight ends come off. Pacheco, Jacobs, Deebo Samuel does come right off of the board. And so immediately we see maybe a flaw in our plan because Jalen Hurts is right there. And so is Patrick Mahomes. And so is Lamar Jackson. And so if you're going to go quarterback early, maybe it feels like round 3 is the way to go. Mike Evans would be a fine start at wide receiver number 1, along with Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Stephon Diggs, DJ Moore. There's also Malik Neighbors, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, and Michael Pittman all available. But not a ton for running backs in this spot. Honestly, James Cook is probably the most tempting in this area. And then admittedly, like after this, it does kind of fall a little bit. So, man, it feels weird to just pass up wide receiver already. Like at this point, most drafts we've had 2, but we're going to keep passing it up. We're going to go 0 WR in this one. And we are going to go with one who I think is going to be a major breakout this year in James Cook. And so we got that, we got that Buffalo offense that everyone's so excited about. Immediately after us goes Diggs, Collins. We got a couple quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts coming off the board. Patrick Mahomes comes off as well. And now it comes back around to us here in round number 4. Now, there are a few running backs that are available. So I think already we've made a couple tactical errors here. I think we went around too early on Allen, and maybe we went around too early with Cook. So maybe like getting probably Nico Collins would have been the play for me Mike Evans in that spot as well, and then come back here now with Joe Mixon as our RB2. I think that would have been a pretty good spot to get that. Cooper Kupp, I'm worried about that offense, and specifically Matthew Stafford going down with an injury. Zay Flowers, I think, is a fine pick. Tank Dell, I think, is all right as well. Sorry, I forgot to push this up. So there you see the top 4, if you're watching on YouTube, the top 4 that are available in half-point PPR. And so we're in a tricky spot here right now because there isn't a whole lot of receivers that I love, but it does start to fall off here. And so it feels like we need to get one of them. Even if there's an injury at quarterback, Kupp, I think, can be fine. It's just if there's an injury to him, I get a little bit worried, but we are going to go Cooper Kupp in this spot. Immediately after, a couple of tight ends go with Mark Andrews and Trey McBride. CJ Stroud goes as well. One of the RBs comes off the board in Kenneth Walker. Another quarterback and another tight end in Kincaid come off. So again, we're in a spot where like Joe Mixon is right there for us. That just feels like such a great pick here in this spot. But we are getting to the point where I'm losing my safety net at tight end, and I want to get that. So we're going to go George Kittle here at the tight end spot. Get that one really kind of locked in. I don't want to be playing around in the mid to late part of tight end all season long. And Kyle Pitts does come off of the board in that spot. Joe Mixon went a couple picks after us. And so it loops back around. In my mind, I'm thinking we need to get a receiver. The best available right now is Keenan Allen. And looking at the players here, this is kind of why we've waited on quarterback to this point, because there's no one in this area that really jumps out to me as I need to get this guy. When we look at the top 4 available, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson, and Rome Odunze, I don't need the 3rd best wide receiver in Chicago in this spot. And the other ones like Xavier Worthy could be great, but this feels like a wild overpay. Chris Godwin, I have worries about him maybe falling off a little bit. Evan Ingram isn't for me, so this is where Kyler has kind of been the play. And so this, to me, does really validate not waiting too long on quarterback, but waiting on quarterback and getting to this point. So while we are here, we are kind of stuck. I've been getting this guy the whole time. I still think he's going to have a role in this Miami offense. I'm going Raheem Mostert with our selection here in the 6th round. After that, Dak comes off the board. For running backs, it's DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, and Zamir White. Jonathan Brooks comes off as well. For receivers, it was just Allen, Rice, and Odunze that came off of the board. And so looking at it now, we have Ingram, Worthy, Godwin, and Ridley as our top players available. After that, Tony Pollard is the best running back available, followed by Nick Chubb, Zach Moss, Javonte Williams, Jaylen Warren being questionable stings a little bit. That's a player that we've kind of been targeting as this has gone along. Now that we're here into the 7th round, we still only have the one wide receiver. And so I feel like at this point, it's come to the area where taking a shot on Xavier Worthy, I don't think is absolutely devastating. We have built up our depth in other areas, so we feel all right about where we are at with Xavier Worthy. You guys know, if you've been watching, there are players that I am targeting now in around these areas, and most of them are wide receivers. And just for those who haven't been watching, it is Christian Watson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Jameson Williams. We have also been targeting Brian Williams in this area. And so those are a couple of very tempting plays right now. Even though like ADP, I feel like I could get one of them, but this is a spot where I think like I don't love any of the other options that are available. Nick Chubb, if he's great, could be a league winner. Zach Moss might get some volume and some touchdowns, but I don't love it. Javonte Williams, that actually might not be a bad pick, actually. But I really like these wide receivers, and so that's why we can go a little bit RB heavy in the beginning and wide receiver light in the back part, is because I do think once you get down to around 8, 9, 10th round, there are some guys that we can get that we feel comfortable with. So we're going to go with Watson. Moss comes off the board, Deontay Johnson. You have Benson. There, Javonte Williams goes at the beginning of the 9th. So we didn't necessarily get the guy who we wanted there. But as it swings back around to us, Austin Eckler is available. And so that makes it a little bit tempting, but the guy we really do want in this area it has been Jackson Smith and Jigba. As I've been thinking about it more, Jamison Williams is creeping up in my mind a little bit, but we are still going to go Jackson Smith and Jigba in this spot. And maybe Williams can swing back around to us. Eckler and Robinson both come off the board. Robinson was one I was kind of hoping, and there goes Jamison Williams. So was probably pie in the sky to think that we could get both or all three, I guess, in this spot. Would have been nice, but we don't quite lock it down. Now here's a spot that there are a couple of running backs who I am interested in here. Jerome Ford, I think is going to have a fair amount of the backfield in Cleveland this year, and I actually think he was quite good. So I think that's an interesting play. And Chase Brown, admittedly, I heard Chris Harris talking him up the other day. Chase Brown was a player that I wouldn't hate getting in this spot now. And so there's a few running backs that are starting to creep up. The wide receivers have fallen off. This is where I think we now build up our running back depth. I'm still going to go with Jerome Ford here. Maybe it swings back around, but Ford is definitely the one that I want to come away with. Chase Brown. So again, team one, we might try to work out a trade at some point because they got a couple of the running backs that we like. And then after this, it's kind of auto pick for me. With Zach Charbonnet here in the 11th round. I think people are really underestimating the amount of volume that he is going to get in this offense this year. And so Zach Charbonnet is definitely the pick to click for me in the 11th round. And now after this, there have been a couple of occasions where we've looked at our defense and our kickers. When you look at what's available here still, there's 4 rounds left. Couple more tight ends coming off the board. Aaron Rodgers coming off the board here in the 12th. And so best players available right now: Joshua Palmer, Jerry Jeudy, and Rashid Shaheed for wide receivers. At quarterback, it is Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford. At running back, it's Rico Dowdle, Ty Chandler, Marshawn Lloyd, and Tyler Algier. There's just nothing that's really jumping off to me. And so I think I can get ahead of things on the defensive side. We will go with the New York Jets defense here and lock that one. And you can go San Francisco as well. I don't think there's a wrong play there, which is why maybe it's the smarter move to wait another round. But looking at what went off the board between that pick and now ours, Shaheed, Jeudy, Palmer, Lloyd out of Green Bay. Downs is the one in Indy where it's like, oh man, that one might have been nice. But I just don't trust that offense this year. Brandon Cooks, Matthew Stafford, Rico Dowdle, Tyler Algier, and then the 49ers defense. We are still going to wait the 15th round, maybe even the 14th to get our kicker. But now looking at what is left, Kirk Cousins, best quarterback available by a ton. Receivers, Gabe Davis, Jahan Dotson, Jalen Polk, Ricky Pearsall, and Troy Franklin. At running back, Ty Chandler and Antonio Gibson are still available in these spots. You have to scroll down a ways to get some of the other guys who are kind of popping up. But I think Polk is interesting. It sounds like that offense maybe isn't going to be as dumpster fiery, and he is a player where if it doesn't look like it's working in week 1, I can just drop and it's fine. And so maybe to get ahead of the kicker thing, we go here in the 14th round, because again, there just aren't a whole lot of guys who I'm clamoring for position player wise. And even now there are a bunch of kickers coming off of the board. And so we'll go, let's go Jake Moody for San Francisco. Keep that kicker run rolling. And then we will get our final player here with our last selection as the kicker and defense run continues to go along. So it comes to us. Kirk Cousins is still available. Which honestly, like, not the worst. If we hadn't gone Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins as a pick that's available, I think is interesting. There isn't a whole lot here, to be perfectly frank with you. So I'm going to go Khalil Herbert. He's been getting an interesting amount of volume with Chicago in this preseason, and it feels like they're saving him up and using Swift more, and so you can read into that. And also, I think Herbert is actually good, and so I think getting a talented running back here in the 15th round is a pretty good thing. And so the draft concludes with defenses aplenty. And so let's see. We took a bit of a risk. We changed up the strategy a little bit. How do we like our team? Our starting quarterback is Josh Allen. Our running backs are Bijan Robinson and James Cook. That is an excellent 1-2. We have Raheem Mostert as our third, which I think in terms of a flex play is fine. Our receivers are Cooper Kupp, Xavier Worthy, and then it's Christian Watson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Jalen Polk. So actually didn't end up too bad if we're right on Watson and Smith and Jigba, or if Worthy hits. So we're honestly not in that bad of a spot, given how early we went on quarterback. I still think, for those watching on YouTube, like this area here, this 5th, 6th, 7th is kind of the neighborhood I want to be living in when it comes to drafting a quarterback. Anything later and you're getting a little bit dicey. But still, I like that we got the tight end and Kittle there. So overall, I think this team is fine. We're ending up with a lot of the same guys on our teams, which is fine. But overall, I think drafting from the middle part of there, it didn't set us back too much. If you want to go quarterback early, that is fine. But I do feel like there are maybe some better options for you if you just wait a little bit further down. So that is going to do it. If you liked this, make sure that you literally do that while watching. If you're listening, make sure to leave a review. Subscribe to the podcast or subscribe to the YouTube channel. I am at Primetime Klein on social media, and I will talk to all of you as the fantasy previews continue and all the talk continues tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.